This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome, listeners, to Postcards from the Edge. I am your host, Amy Nelson. I am back this week, and I just have to give a huge thank you and shout out to Justin Ozer, who did an amazing job with Joe Keegan last week. And again, just thank you so much. It was very nice to have that show still go, even though I was unavailable. So this week, we have with us Chris Tribuzio. He is our associate producer here on The Edge. Chris, thank you for joining with me on Postcards.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for having me on. And it's great to know that the bribe that I sent you came just in time for me to be on the show.
Yes, I got it. And listeners, that bribe, now of course we are kidding, is a Captain Pike pin. And so I want to encourage you to go to the iTunes and leave us a star rating and written review. And then your name will be entered into our giveaway for a Captain Pike pin by Fansets. And I'm very excited. We have already 5 entries, but this is going the entire time of season 2. So listen to the main show after the last episode of season 2, and we will have that giveaway. So just listeners, if you are interested, please do that, and we would appreciate it. Well, today we are going to discuss the fan response to Season 2, Episode 6, The Sound of Thunder. Now, if you would like to participate and share your response, please post your comments on the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Type Babel, B-A-B-E-L, into the search field, and it will come right up. Now, as of this recording, we had 167 comments, which compared to last week of 170, is just a very small decrease of 0.18% decrease. So it looks like we're holding steady right around that 170, 167 mark. Chris, did you have a chance to see all those comments?
I did see all the comments, and the only thing I can think of for this slight decrease is the fact that I'm on the show.
Oh, shush.
No, I did see all the comments, and I enjoyed reading all of them.
Yes. So, Chris, you, I'm sure, have seen it. And what did you think of The Sound of Thunder?
I did see it a total of 3 times, and each time one word resonated with each watch. So the first word that came to mind during the first watch was religion, as we knew we were coming back to Saru's homeworld, and we knew exactly why, and he had lost his ganglia. To me, it felt like he was going to be the prophet to come by and denounce the Baul and, come by and say, look at me, look at what happened. The second time I watched it, the word that came to mind was emotion. And in an episode that's so character-centric, the actor who's based upon the episode goes through a lot of this emotion. It's a mental tear. And each part of this episode, Doug Jones performed brilliantly, which we'll hear in some of the comments as some of the listeners and those that commented actually agreed. He did an excellent job. And the third time was communication. I want to go back to last week's conversation with Patrick and Brandon, where Brandon stated that this is what we need is communication. And this is where society lies defunct in, to a point where nobody sits down and everybody reacts just on first contact, for lack of a better term. So those three words right there definitely resonated with me in each of the three watches.
Absolutely. And so interesting because after I watched it a couple times, I had a different word that came to mind. So interesting how each person will see and pick up on different themes. And again, just goes to the writing of what Star Trek is and Discovery and how well they are doing to bring up these different themes. Listeners, again, I do apologize. You will have to listen to the main show where I will discuss these themes that I saw in this episode, because Postcards is about the fan response. So let's get to it. Chris, why don't you start us off with the first comments?
I wouldn't be gentleman enough if I didn't express chivalry. So ladies first, if you would.
Okay. Well, also I wanted to point out, we've got a lot of new commenters. So I'm trying to, as we go through, highlight those who are new or first time or that I haven't read before. And we start off with a couple of them. Mike Richard says, Doug Jones impresses more and more each week. Quote, perhaps feeling less like yourself means you are feeling more like the person you were meant to be. And similarly, Jim Stoffel says, really enjoyed tonight's episode. General Order 1 took a little beating, but my favorite quote was pure bliss. Perhaps feeling less like yourself means you are feeling more like the person you were meant to be. So I put those two comments together because they did have that amazing quote where Saru is talking to Culber. And it definitely, that is one of the themes that I saw throughout. Just, who were you meant to be? And, how are you going to feel and behave now that you have this recognition?
I agree. This quote definitely resonated with me in so many levels. It's almost like a soul search kind of quote. And be that it may with Culber's current condition, this is something for him to look forward to. Who knows? Maybe he won't be a doctor anymore because the scar has been taken away. So he'll have to find his own place on Discovery outside the medical field.
Yeah, I am wondering if Culber is going to go back to being a doctor. He seems very traumatized, as would anyone be. So it's going to be interesting.
Yes, it will. Absolutely. Aaron Eichler writes, it was an awesome episode. Saru got to go home, got to see what his people were meant to be, and got a better look at the Red Angel. And I was also glad to see why Section 31 was so interested in the Angel. Section 31, for those that don't know, for those that haven't followed it throughout the run, has always been the skeptical, paranoid division that always looks on the fourth wall, if you would say, of a lot of things. And that conversation that Pike and Tyler had at the end definitely put a snark to me and made me scratch the chin a little bit. What is their ideal for it?
Yeah, I mean, and even at the beginning where, like what you were saying, Section 31 is, they are in direct contrast to Starfleet because their assumption is, as they said, that these red signals, they need to be interpreted as hostile and, this negative and assume the worst. And so it's interesting to see the dichotomy between the two organizations within Starfleet.
If I can interject before you read the next comment, it's also similar of how the Ba'ul looked at the Kelpians, the way Section 31 is looking at the signals and their role in Starfleet.
Brian Sherman says, in the years to come, I think The Sound of Thunder will be talked about with the greatest Trek episodes. I do want to give a huge shout out to the sound designers. If you have a decent surround sound system, this episode was a real treat. And while I found the in-person Baul a little hard to understand, not Tom Hardy's Bane hard, but still, I thought when they were talking through the view screen, it was almost as impressive as the first time you heard Darth Vader. Well, Brian, great comment to recognize the sound and all of that was displayed. It was, again, every time I think the special effects and the sound that they're putting forth is great and just very cinematic.
I say this time and time again, the cinematics for this season have gone over the top and never disappoint. I saw this comment this morning, and Brian took the words right out of my mouth when it comes to the voice of the Baul. It's not so hard to understand. I watched it all 3 times with the subtitle, with the closed caption on. I have yet to see it without it, so I can try to make it out. But absolutely, the sound design, the production value, all across the board, this season has definitely sparked my interest. Ria Papagiorgio writes, can't wait to watch a few more times. The way Doug Jones can emote through prosthetics and makeup is phenomenal. The look he gave Serana at the end just blew me away. Tyler seems to have partaken of the Section 31 Kool-Aid. I get he's torn apart inside, but I don't know that I buy where his paranoia is directed. At least not yet. Saru's homeworld is beautiful. Does Delta fly there? I'd totes go. Poor Culber, his new body may be pristine, but it's going to take him a while to recover psychologically if he recovers. Stamets' expression looking at him was of such joy and bliss, but I think denial as well. Not wanting to accept that this may not be the same Culber he knew. For those of us outside the U.S., looks like we'll see Spock next week. Honestly, I'd lost interest in the search for Spock. No idea who the Red Angel is, except perhaps Harry Mudd. Cool tie-in to use the sphere data, and was excited to see more of Arium. This is where I'd like to see 26 episode seasons to develop these characters. So many points that Rhea brings up that I can talk about. Okay. The new style of storytelling. We're all used to 26 episodes, but nowadays we're reduced to anywhere from 8 to 12 to 15, as we saw last season. And it's so interesting how they cram everything in. But the question remains, do we revisit it in the following season? Is this something that they want to tie in just the main points as we see maybe some short BCD plots? Maybe we revisit the BCD plots, become the A plots throughout the season, or do they hold off on it and with the advent of short treks maybe expand a little bit? Or do we see it in season 3? She also writes about Culber. Here's my thing. Amy, you and I are Star Trek family. So I'm going to ask you this. If I should be resequenced through my DNA, I'm going to ask that you tell these people to shave 60 pounds off me. And there's a mole that's right about right. I'm only kidding. But again, like we said earlier, Culber may be here, but he's got a lot of work to go for him to totally be here. And that's in both his relationship with Stamets and himself.
Yeah, I really liked, Rhea, your comment about Stamets and how Stamets might be a little bit in denial and not recognizing the immense change that Culber is going through, because he's now got Culber back and he just wants to, hug and kiss on him, as would anyone, but he's not ready yet. So very interesting to notice it from Stamets' perspective. So thank you for your comment. Justin Ozer says, this was such a beautiful, moving, and inspiring episode that builds on everything we've seen before of Saru and the Kelpians. Wow. I felt for the Kelpians and everything they've been through more than ever, and it was so wonderful to see them step out into a new world of possibilities. It was super interesting to find out the Red Angel seems to be humanoid in a mechanized suit. Dan Gunther had a theory before the episode dropped on his Kurtrat's YouTube channel that the Red Angel is a future Michael Burnham, and that seems more likely now. I'm still betting on a species we haven't seen before, but I really don't know. The only part that was a little tough for me was understanding all of what the Ba'ul were saying because the voice was represented as so distorted. However, I could easily enough get the rough feel of it. I've been loving every episode this season. Bring on Spock next week.
I totally agree. Everybody, it seems like the writers actually know us to the point where we're like, bring on Spock. And then all of a sudden they pop up the Red Angel and like, Spock who? Who's the Red Angel? Never mind Spock. The Spock comes next week. That's fine. Who's this Red Angel? Who is it? And to be honest, I don't know. It could be Tinkerbell for all I know, to be quite honest. There's so many speculations.
And we will get
theories.
To those speculations in a little bit. So hang on.
I'll try. but there's so many theories that everybody's popping up, and it's a shame we won't find out, and it's got to wait 7 days. Brando Calrissian writes, that was a great episode. I love the character building they're going into with the main cast. Not having as many episodes per season as other Treks led me to believe it would be mostly overall plot action, but they're taking some deep dives and I love it.
Absolutely. It is interesting to try and figure out, okay, we only get 14 episodes and they are still getting us these character developments that we know and we love about Star Trek.
You got to think that, like I was saying, you got to think they actually laugh at us at the end of every season. Like, oh my God, did you see what could happen? What could happen? There's the writers in the back room like, okay, we got them. Hook, line, sinker, we got them. There's no doubt about it. Absolutely right. But for the shortness of the episodes, the shortness of the season, they do pack a lot in to each character, to Brando's point. They do pack a lot in, and it's absolutely fantastic how they do it.
Yeah. Alexandra Sandu says, I just read a YouTube comment by Mark Zutkoff that I found intriguing. Quote, I thought Pike was rather cavalier about the stretching of General Order 1. I wonder if eventually something will happen that will cause it to become Prime Directive we know and hate from TOS, as opposed to something to dismiss when convenient to do so. And Alexandra says, and I'm thinking he might be onto something here, because this could also explain why we don't see any Kelpians in later Trek. Culling or not, at last there was some sort of balance, but now the Ba'ul might exterminate the Kelpians as a result of Federation interference. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I don't know if that we will see any more from Discovery. Like it's sort of, we got the build up. We know the two species and sort of what happened thanks to the sphere of last week. And so I hope we get to see follow through. But if it's like any previous series, we won't see any follow through with that planet, Kaminar.
I'm along the lines with you on this. I don't think we'll see it. If we do, maybe a couple mentions throughout the series as we're hoping for 7. But I think it's more of a novel idea. Forgive the pun, but it's more for the novel for it to be elaborated and to be put in words a lot more. I think it's going to be a novel for sure. And David Mack or Kirsten Beyer or anybody else is probably tagged on to do so. So.
That is a great idea. And I would read, yes, that for sure.
I have a list of books that I have to read.
Yes.
One of which was a suggestion by you.
Yes. Embody.
Yes, I know. I'm getting to it. I just passed the forward. Thank you. Okay. Tyler Orenchuk. He states, cool episode. I'm glad Saru and the crew of the Discovery and the Red Angel were able to help the Kelpians. I like the voice of the Bell, pretty scary. My favorite scene was when Saru saw Sarana threatened, so he broke free and rescued her. I was hoping for more with Dr. Culber, but I guess we'll have to wait. Looking forward to the next episode. I absolutely love Kick Butt Saru. I absolutely love it. Though there was that one scene where he's facing off with Pike, and listeners out there, this was made for TV. Do not do this at home with your own workplace, because they will ship you. You will go home. Pike had no choice because space is nothing. And plus, he'd probably be put in his quarters, and they'll probably see him in the mess hall. But all that being said, I love this Saru. I love the fact that he has to speak up. I love the fact that we're actually seeing someone that's not playing the safe card anymore. That it's more or less, this is for me. This is my home world. Let me go down there. I understand Pike's view that there's two sides to this, that he's a threat to this, especially in his current state, but he's also the best one for the job. And leave it for Michael to be Saru's anchor, like we've seen that they become this brother-sister team, to where Michael could actually ground him to the point where he can actually, talk about it and whatnot and become centered.
Yeah, there was some questions about, now all of a sudden Saru's got this extraordinary power, but it was brought up that we saw his amazing speed and his power in season 1, when we went down to Sivi Saperum Bellum, that episode.
Something Latin. Yes.
Yes. And, and so we know that he has extreme strength and speed. And, when he kicked Burnham in season 1, like that was pretty powerful. And maybe the loss of his threat ganglia might make that more, that he's willing to use it more, because now he has more devotion to what he's doing and a purpose. And especially being, caught in, that is a very dangerous situation that he's in. So his adrenaline's going to be going. So I bought it. I didn't question. And I, like you, Tyler, thought it was pretty awesome as well.
See, I don't have brothers and sisters. I'm an only child. So, for someone like yourself who's got sisters and who's got the brothers, sisters, and a family, I can see where the adrenaline kicks in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Don't mess with my family. Yep.
Exactly. And granted, though I don't have brothers and sisters, I feel exactly the same way. And I can see where the, child gets stuck under the bus and the mom picks him up because of the adrenaline. I can definitely see that in this episode.
Well, my good friend Tim Robertson says, a great episode. Just finished watching it a second time. Here are some of my character thoughts. Culber, he isn't himself. He has changed, which is good. His reactions to being touched. He isn't comfortable in his new skin. Really looking forward to seeing when he can renew his relationship with Stamets. Saru, his psychological changes of losing his fear has already shown that he is now a lot more confrontational. He will need to learn to back off a bit in the future. He doesn't seem like a team player right now. The Red Angel is Michael. She is everywhere it shows up. Even Spock used it to find her. Freeze frame the shot of the Red Angel. It is definitely a woman's figure, but hopefully she won't do a Barry Allen and screw up the timeline. Next week on Discovery, Spock returns! ! Well, Tim, thank you for your comment and recognizing each of those characters. I think you've nailed it each time.
I have nothing, and I love the tie-in with crossing the streams here. He's nailed each and every point. Hakora Gormundinson says, wow, this episode ties so many loose ends in a brilliant and sometimes unexpected ways. I wonder if this is why Saru was so violent when he lost his fear on the Pavan homeworld, as you have stated earlier. As some have said, the Baul also reminded me of Artemis from TNG, but I wonder if this is similarly developed species from a different world, if not the same species. Doug Jones's acting has always been amazing, but this time he outdid himself. The expressions and the development of the character was so great and clear, and still mostly expressed through the eyes, gestures, and body language, which is so limited facial expressions. Great to see an episode with such tension, drama, action, and character development at the same time. Well done, Disco. Now I'm more excited to learn about the Red Angel, almost more than finding Spock. Again, it's Spock who. Now it's all about the Red Angel. He hits on a lot of points. Yourself being the TNG guru of the two of us, I'm sure you made that connection as well with the Skin of Evil. I also thought, being that May was in a couple episodes ago, when they had it in the chamber, I actually thought of Skin of Evil in that essence. I didn't actually think of it in this essence until people were talking about it. But he hits on a lot of stuff. And again, sometimes nonverbal cues can actually emote further than verbal cues.
Absolutely. And Chris Littlefield coined the phrase the Saru swagger, and we got to see a lot of that as he was walking. We got to see him with his hands and just how he moves his body. And you're like, this is brilliant. I mean, the entire character that Doug Jones has built in Saru is absolutely amazing. So yes, and wonderful tie-in to TNG, Artemis, Skin of Evil. I totally thought that. It was exactly the same. They're bringing him up and slowly in the tar dripping down him. And yeah. I
actually thought of the Ring Girl. And it was brought up.
By Brandy.
By Brandy. Yeah, everybody from everybody from Live from the Edge, when they did their podcast, it was the Ring Girl. That's what I thought of.
What's Ring Girl? I don't know.
The Ring. Have you seen the movie The Ring?
No.
I'll have to send you a picture, and you'll.
Okay, so it's from the movie The Ring.
It's from the movie The Ring.
Okay.
And how the same exact hair falling down.
Oh, okay.
Kind of look.
And The Ring is a scary horror movie, right?
It is a horror
That's
movie,
why
yes.
I haven't seen it. And that the whole thing with the Baul, it was very scary, almost to the point of where I was like, oh, I can't watch it. But I knew I had to because I, podcast about it. But yeah, that kind of horror, it was very scary, horror-esque. So they are trying to get these different themes, or not themes, but different scenes and different types of cinematography into this, which again, just makes it that much more interesting because it's not always the same type of look.
Understood and agreed. And, so your Saru post-ganglia kicked in to further watch the episode. Is that what it is?
Yes. Well, Shoaib Mirza says, oh my Baul, finally watched The Sound of Thunder with the wifey. We both agree it's brilliant on so many levels. My top 3 points. Number 1, the continuation of Saru's storyline. Damn, I love this character, and Doug Jones' performance, a master of masked acting. The scenes on Kaminar, beautiful and felt like an alien world. Point number 2. Starfleet is here, and they ain't standing idly by while the Baul attempt genocide. Powerful dialogue on the bridge. Pike is everything we admire about captains. He opens with diplomacy, then amps up the response to deal with the escalating situation like a badass. Number 3, Burnham shaping up to be my favorite character along with Saru. They have wonderful chemistry and elevate the story to another level. Can't wait till next week. Well, Shoaib, thank you for your top 3 points. And I have to agree. I love Captain Pike and exactly what we want in a captain, to try with diplomacy and then don't mess. Saru is one of mine, he says to the Baul, and he's fierce when he has to be, but he's going to knock on the door for an invitation first.
kudos to the writers for writing a character that we've only seen in one episode of this 50-plus year franchise. Kudos also to Anson Mount for bringing that writing to screen, giving us a feel of a character we never knew before, and putting it on screen, both emotion, verbal. Anson Mount does an absolutely fantastic job, and I don't know, Pike's becoming my number one.
Oh, I know.
But it's also interesting, though. I mean, he's faced with the General Order 1, but yet he also has his own beliefs, and he also has a job to do. So at what point do you press which button? And he does a great job discerning between the two to make the right decision. Liam Smart says, "This now would be my favorite episode of all Discovery. Seeing Saru so strong and fighting for his people was beautiful. The story was written well, and it was great to see further tie-in with the Sphere and the Red Angel into Saru's overall arc. I'm not sure whether that was an actual Ba'ul that we saw, but I hope it was, like the Tar Monster style vibe. As with others here, I really have felt halfway through the episode that the Ba'ul were going to just be evolved Kelpian, but the twist that the Kelpian were the predators was pleasantly surprising to me. Classic display at the end of the fear from the Ba'ul, rendering logical thought useless as they were going to ignore Pike's threat as they were so blinded by fear. The Red Angel coming, destroying the first fires from Discovery, saving both the Ba'ul and the Kelpians, that was showing true nature of the Angel. It's saving people and using the Discovery to do so. Going back to the monologue from episode 1 from Burnham, the Discovery's hearts aren't open enough to see it. The Red Angel knows it and is using them. On a lighter note, my partner said, if this Red Angel turns out to be Harry Mudd, I'm going to start smashing things. He hates mud. He also decided to link all memory beta canon up with it and is convinced it's Iconian. I don't have the heart to tell him that Star Trek Online and books aren't canon. I hope it's not Iconian, though. I really want it to be something new, but if it's Iconian, I guess it'll still be neat. Okay. From a guy who plays Star Trek Online, I can say that the writers who write this game are absolutely phenomenal writers. And it's almost as if they themselves are Trek fans, and they do with this so well. So I can understand where that's coming from, how it's not canon, but they do write the story so well in this. Again, who is it? That's the crux of the whole thing, is who is the Red Angel? And it kills every one of us that we don't know who it is.
Well, which leads us to a section that I just had to insert because thanks to Tony Salazar, he says it's crazy theory time. And so there were many predictions of the Red Angel, and I just had to lump them all together. It's so interesting to see what everyone thinks. So Chris, before we get started, do you have any predictions on who or what the Red Angel is?
Myself, I don't know. I know it's a mechanized suit. It's a feminine figure, but I don't know. I thought it was future Spock at first, coming back. I thought it was Michael, future Guy from Enterprise. So many things I honestly don't know, and I'm in for the ride to see who it is.
It might be something like that because now this is the second time that the red anomalies have been said. Well, it might be time incursions. And so it was last episode and this episode. And I was like, okay, they're building up to something. But Tony Salazar says, crazy theory time. The Red Angel is a future Amanda traveling through time and space to set her children on a path of reconnection and reconciliation. All right. There's your first prediction.
All right. I can actually see that as a mother of, not myself, but as the mother of the two children. How to put them on the right path to see each other as finally brother and sister, to acknowledge themselves, to have one steer the other on the right path. I can see that one. Theory number 2, Christopher Mock says, did anyone else get a V'ger vibe here? Like the Red Angel was Spock in the thruster suit.
Bill Sweet, I'm calling it. The Red Angel is Burnham time traveling. And maybe that's why Spock never mentions her in TOS. Okay, so one for Burnham, one for V'ger, or one for Spock, and one for Amanda.
Are you writing all these down here? Hold on.
Taking a poll.
All right, here we go. Shoad Mirza writes, also my prediction is that the Red Angel is future Burnham, traveling back to correct past events. 2 for Burnham.
Jay Sosnicki, the Red Angel is Borg. I'm all for that. Bring in the TNG.
Right? That's what I'm talking about. Bring it all in. Tie all the series in if you could. Christopher Littlefield writes, really, really dug this episode. I can't get the idea that these are Iconians in some form out of my head.
Okay, so one for the Iconians. Well, 2 because Liam had mentioned that.
Liam had mentioned it, yes.
Yep. Rhea Papagiorgio, OMG, the Red Angel is Harry Mudd. Okay, I don't even know. I guess because of that device he had on his arm. Okay.
Right, yeah. To be able to rewind 30 seconds or whatever it is, I guess he's now.
All right. Interesting. I have seen a couple of Harry Mudd references. I don't get it, but whatever.
It's what we want to see as fans. That's the ultimate question. Carl Baird writes, another cracking episode, but I expect people are going to lose their minds when they find out the Red Angel is actually Wesley Crusher.
Yes.
Yes. Him and the time traveler, like that old TV show Voyagers way back when they went back to look at history. I could actually see that happening.
I know. I didn't even think of Wesley Crusher, but now I'm there with you, Carl. All right. Well, let's get to our bits and pieces. And I just really have to thank Janessa. She's always giving me something to put in this category. And she writes, I like the mention of Cabo Rojo, which is in Puerto Rico and part of Wilson Cruz's background. And she posted a very beautiful picture on the thread, and it was so nice. And I said, all right, we all need to have a Trek FM meetup. Let's go.
I'm ready.
Yes.
That's, looking at the picture that she sent. Okay, there's many things on my bucket list. Skydiving is one. And when she posted that picture of Puerto Rico, I'm like, cliff diving is another. But again, if I'm resequenced, please make sure that they shave 60 pounds off me, because when I drop into that water from that high up, there may not be a lake.
It's going to hurt. I'm just saying.
There may not be a lake. That's all I'm saying. Billy Wells Logue says, the scene between Pike and Tyler was so good in the end. Pike's clenched jaw as Tyler walked away gave me shivers. Hallelujah. Because I said the same exact thing. And what is 31's involvement?
Yes.
And we'll find out later.
I know the tension between those two is so well played. I love it.
It's Pike having to discern, now with 31 into it, it's Pike having to discern between regulation, own belief, and having 31 to mediate or have an answer between the two. It's just amazing.
Robert Lundqvist says, do humans from Earth drink tea? Earl, Grey Hot. Love it, Robert. I thought the same thing when Serana asked that of Michael.
I actually shouted that too. I was like,
oh,
yes.
That's what
Earl
I
Grey.
heard.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Well, here on Postcards, we don't always read the positive. We do get to some questions and concerns. So, Chris, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Chris Foster writes, my only disappointment was in the design of the Bowel. Reminded me of Armus from TNG Skin of Evil. It was too horror movie and left so many questions unanswered. I wanted to learn more about them. Okay. There's been a lot of questions as to how did the Bowel get this technology to eradicate the Kelpians. And it was over 2,000 years or 200 years. There was a
2,000.
number involved. 2,000. The only thing I can think of is our own technology itself and how we protect ourselves from other countries, I guess we would say, should there be a time of need. But again, it's one of those things where you got to ask yourself, just how did it? And it took 2,000 years. Medicine itself takes a long time. It's not just a thought up and put it out on the market process. When it comes to medicine, it's the thought, the science behind it, the trial, the error, and then to put out to our government for here in the States, it's the FDA, and then put it out to the market. Something along those lines, I could see.
Well, Chris, I agree with you on that it was very horror movie feel, and I myself do not tend to see things like that. It definitely was, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I watching? It did scare me. I don't mind the suspense psychological thriller, say like last season when they went to the Glen and that was spooky and, but we didn't, and it wasn't, I guess it was a little on the verge of horror, but like this was definitely horror genre. And so I can agree with you, Chris. It was maybe a little bit too much for me and my preferences as it was with you. So
there's a difference between the feel of horror and the actual sight of it. Aside from the obvious. But yeah, I can get how some people who don't like horror, who are not used to horror movies, and Discovery's this happy-go-lucky positive message kind of TV series comes across and they do this 180. And they, just for, how long was it? 5-6 minutes? Just for 5 or 6 minutes. But the tone that it set put forth the acting and in the storyline. So, yeah.
Jay Sosnicki writes, this season is too touchy-feely. Story arc confusing. I don't like that Spock is being evolved into this almost Christ-like figure. I like that the actress playing Amanda actually looks like a young Jane Wyatt. Wilson Cruz's character didn't need to return. Pike is a stud. I love OG Klingon look, Tyler Vogt, assuming this will somehow be spun into an explanation for how non-Worf looking Klingons existed in TOS. Saru is still the breakout character. Evil Georgiou is the biggest badass of everyone in the cast. Burnham, the ostensible lead, is the least interesting character on the show. All right, Jay. Well, thank you for sharing with us what you really think. I don't know about the touchy-feely. I get what you're saying, because if I look back on, say, like TNG, as I always, my go-to, it wasn't too touchy-feely. And you're right, there's definitely more of that, but I think maybe that's because they are focused more on this character development. And in life, you have relationships and they do affect you and they affect your heart. And so I can see where you're coming from just compared to previous series of Star Trek.
Yeah. His comment about the OG Klingon look, that was actually explored in Enterprise during the 4th season, maybe. Yeah, during the 4th season, where the Klingon scientists were doing experiments and the ridges had gone away. And that's how they claimed TOS's Klingons got to be the way they are, that there were so few of the rigid Klingons, that the non-rigid Klingons were more dominant. Andrea Boot writes, I thought I would like this week's episode as it was Saru-centered episode, but I was disappointed. Aww. Saru felt like he was throwing a teenage temper tantrum the whole time, and his insubordinate and at times mutinous behavior felt really out of character for him. I can understand your point, Andrea, but you have to remember that the Saru we knew, that rhymed, that the Saru we knew back then was based off of fear. That's what it was. It was fear. It was balancing right from wrong, do or do not. And with this Saru now, because he has no fear, he has this attitude. I understand the teenage angst, but you also have to understand that sometimes some of us in real life, our adrenaline kicks in. Like Amy was saying earlier, it's the adrenaline that kicks in, and the fact to voice your opinion without fear of retaliation comes into play with that. There are most times where some of us, myself included, would love to speak our minds about things, but we do what we call choose our own battles. Do we want to talk about it? Or do we want to shout about it? Or do we want to sit and say, you know what, maybe I need to calm down first and calmly discuss this? And this is where communication came in, which is another part of the word, another part of my one word was communication. And how I got that, as much as I love badass Saru, it kind of gave me that feel like, okay, he's doing this out of anger, but there's a way to go about it. And I think because it was his home world, that's why he felt so passionate about it.
Yeah. Andrea, I completely agree with you, because after my first watch, I was messaging with Patrick, we do the main show together, and he's like, so what did you think? And I was just like, and part of it, I do give credit that I had a headache and I wasn't in the best of moods watching it. So, and that whole horror thing. But, I can see definitely Saru that he doesn't know how to act with these new, they are psychological, and these hormones and the emotions going through him. He's just not quite sure how to handle them in the best way. And I think you picked up on that, and I am with you on that as well. It did feel like out of character, but I think the overall theme of we have to figure out who is this new Saru, and that was mentioned many times, in his little monologues throughout the show. It's like, well, who am I now that I don't have fear? So. All right. Nicholas Paul Collinson. Yet another really good episode. I definitely liked it a lot, but I did have one major issue with it, which is that the Starfleet plan to suddenly trigger the Vihari in the Kelpians seemed really unethical. They're just going to trigger this extremely painful and terrifying thing in the entire population of the planet? That doesn't seem right to me. I think that may have just come from having to wrap up all of this in the one episode, because usually the writing on Discovery is much better than that. Further emphasizing my partner's point from the other week about the inconsistencies of Starfleet. That issue aside, I still thoroughly enjoyed this episode. As a biologist, I find the portrayal of the Kelpians fascinating, and just the biological science aspect of Discovery in general. If ever you want to do an episode of The Edge looking at biology and Discovery, I'd love to be a part of it. Well, Nicholas, I absolutely, that is definitely in my thoughts. And I do agree with you. It did seem a little unethical that every one of the Kelpians is going to go and experience Vihari with no warning, with no communication, that all of a sudden everyone's going to go through at the same time, is a bit a moral dilemma.
Which is why we love Trek for its moral episodes, much like this one.
Okay. So, Chris, how do you think that the fans responded to this episode this week?
I found it to be a lot positive. I found it to be enlightening. I found it to be so pro Saru, with the minor comments on Section 31's involvement and why Saru did all this here. But I found it to be mostly positive, and I definitely enjoyed reading all these comments.
Yeah, it was interesting. Even some of them were like, this is my favorite episode so far of Discovery. And I was like, wow, and I read that every single week. So I just think Discovery is doing it right this season.
I say that every single week.
Right? Well, be sure to check out our Discovery coverage here on the network. We have Live from the Edge, airs Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, so you can watch Bruce and Brandy and ask questions live, and that will be released as a podcast on Saturday mornings. Chris, you mentioned you were on Live?
I guest hosted, and I was on the live pod. I was commenting along with the other listeners on the live podcast last night.
Yeah, so you attended. Yeah.
I attend. That is the correct term. Yes.
Okay.
I was there.
I guess. Yeah. Well, we have our commentary will be available as tracks from the Edge with the wonderful Mike and Max. So you can listen to that. And of course, you can catch full analysis of the Edge main show with Patrick and myself. You can find all of these in the main feed for The Edge and in the Trek.fm master feed. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Discovery, and the best place to do that is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook, where I will collect your feedback for postcards from The Edge. You can find us on Twitter at TrekFM or send us an email using the contact form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select The Edge. And listeners, we love getting your emails. Keep sending them. They're very, very nice. And sometimes critical, but that's why we love them. So, Chris, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at TrekFanLV. The T, the F, L, and V are capital. You can find me hanging out in the Babel Conference. But you could also find me on the streets of Las Vegas on every corner from time to time with a cardboard sign that says, "We'll Trek for food."
Now, if you are coming to Las Vegas, you now have two people that you could hang out with, Chris and myself. We actually do have someone coming in next month, so we're going to have another Trek Together, as you like to call them.
Glad you mentioned it. Trek Together is 2019. This is something that myself, Amy, and some other locals here in town have discussed about having to do when we were at STLV 2018, and February was our first one. So Las Vegas locals, I invite you to come on down. You can friend request myself. You can find me on Twitter and come on down. We have another one planned for March 30th here in town.
Yeah. Well, you can find me here on the network where I co-host The Edge main show, as I talked about with Patrick. I also co-host Earl Grey, which talks about Next Generation with my good friends Richard Marquez and Justin Ozer. You can also find me on the Fandom Podcast Network, where I co-host Discoville, and that we talk the Orville and Discovery. So much fun. And I do that with Haley Stoddard, Kyle Wagner, and Kevin Reitzel. Do you watch the Orville, Chris?
I do, and I watched this last week.
Okay, I haven't seen it, so don't say anything.
There was a funny part where this one thing happened.
Funny.
No, honestly, I watched the Orville. I also listen to the Fandom Podcast Network for you guys in Discoville. I do support you guys. I support everything that is quality. So you guys do a great job. Yes, I do watch the Orville.
Well, you can also find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson, but my favorite place is right there in the Babel Conference. If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows going and even become an associate producer, visit patreon.com/TrekFM for all the details. And I would like to thank our associate producers. They are Norman C. Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoaib Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, Cornelia Reutner, Ryan Mallett, Chris Tribuzio, and Brian Maloche. Thank you for supporting Trek FM and especially The Edge. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on Postcards. We just love having you on. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you for having me, Amy, and I'll be so sure to send another bribe your direction to have you maybe with you and Patrick on the show.
Well, as an AP of the show, I think you have a little bit more pull than most. Well, join us next week for another episode of Postcards from the Edge. Hailing frequencies open.